tout le monde. Je suis donc Diogène Senny, secrétaire général de la Ligue panafricaine Umoja, et non pas Pierre Eboundi, qui est le président, qui est dans la salle d'ailleurs. Avant de commencer notre intervention...
For the Pan-African League Umoja, our president is in the room. But I would first like to say something about the great period of China. There were also Pan-Africanists like Gerald Padmore who went to China to settle a conflict between the Mao and the Lisan group. And then Mr. Kouyaté was in China, who represented the Negro branch of the Comintern. So I would like to pay homage to the good relations between China and Africa. Now, in the name of our organization, the Pan-African League Umoja, we would first of all like to thank the Schiller Institute for organizing this meeting. And an important meeting it is, coming at a time when financial imperialism, which is itself the natural son of global imperialistic geopolitics, is constantly organizing itself and mutating into various tentacles capable of alienating all sectors of our societies. We would like to express our thanks to the French party, Solidarité Progrès, which honored us with this invitation to be among you here in Frankfurt. This invitation will allow us to make our fight known to the international anti-imperialist family. We in the Pan-African League Umoja are convinced that faced with well-coordinated, united imperialism, we cannot win if we are dispersed, isolated, and disorganized. Dear comrades, our intervention is called BRICS and Panafricanism, Operational Convergence. We will first present the BRICS rapidly and independently, and then Pan-Africanism, which is the ideology of our organization, and then we will show the operational convergence that are needed and even urgent to curb the spread of imperialism wherever that's possible in the hope of defeating it one day. We call the BRICS initiative historical because imperial geopolitics is based on control of the means of financing national economies. And with that, it nullifies the inalienable rights of peoples to define their economic policies freely. The institutions of Bretton Woods, the Club of Paris, the Club of London, and others are the visible instruments that serve to crush the peoples by violating their sovereignty. Therefore, the Pan-African League Umoja welcomes the initiative taken by the BRICS on 15th of July 2014 in Fortaleza to create one of the largest development banks in the world, so as to offer a real development alternative to the World Bank and the IMF. These 5 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, have a total population of 3 billion people, which is about 3 out of 7 Earthlings. It was high time for them to raise their voices in a world which only listens to the balance of power. Current events cannot refute that. Indeed, how else can one understand the humiliation that U.S. courts just imposed on a great country like Argentina, ordering it to pay the vulture funds colossal sums of money, $1.3 billion to be exact. We would just mention that Argentina has 41 million inhabitants and a GDP in 2012 of nearly $475 billion. The Pan-African League Umoja, of course, supports the international solidarity movement of all progressive peoples with respect to the suffering Argentinas. This is nothing but international financial looting. The supreme humiliation of the Argentinian people underscores the importance of finding alternatives to the dominant financial system, such as that proposed now by the BRICS with their development bank. But what the BRICS are doing to try and free themselves from the international dictate is exactly what the Pan-African League Umoja proposes for Africa. As everyone knows, international financial imperialism knows no borders, and Africa, more than any others, has suffered unspeakable harm from such deadly policies under regimes that are often corrupted by the international financial oligarchy. The Pan-Africanism is an ideology inspired by Africa's specific history. For 2 centuries now, we have opposed the imperialism that Africa has been a victim of, first through slavery, then colonization, and now neo-colonialism. For the Pan-African League Umoja, in the tradition of the historical fathers of Pan-Africanism, the only way to end the imperialism that dominates the African world is through political unity of the carved-up, weakened African territories that are the involuntary prey of imperialism and subject to the influence of different powers, which takes away sovereignty. The current imperialism, also called neocolonialism, maintains the African world in a purely colonial economic structure which forces it to remain an eternal provider of raw materials and producer of single crops, monoculture, for export only, while passively consuming imported manufactured products. Financially, the Bretton Woods institutions, in complicity with the former colonizers, call the shots in the African world. Almost from the beginning of their construction, African states were prevented from developing by a series of economic injunctions, and that since the 1980s, forcing them to implement structural adjustment plans by the World Bank and the IMF. The most blatant case was in 1994, when the IMF got France, the former colonizer of 14 countries of the franc zone and the real owner of the CFA franc, to devalue that currency by 50%. The effects of that monetary repression were horrendous. A product imported from France, which was worth 100 CFA francs, was suddenly, from one day to the next, worth 200. To make up for the 100 missing, we had to sell more than double the number of the usual projects. And thus, there was no purchasing power of the population dropped brutally, and there were no compensatory measures, especially since salaries had been blocked for about 10 years on order of the IMF. And to top it all, the debt of those countries in foreign currency was doubled in CFA francs. Thus, 10 years of efforts to reimburse the debt by those countries under IMF structural adjustment plans, a freeze on hiring, downsizing of health and education budgets, blocking the salaries, those efforts were simply wiped out. Africa is a victim of several different imperialisms. There's the multilateral imperialism, which is the IMF, and this is what is exercised by all of the Western world and imposed on Africa. And in Africa itself, especially in the French-speaking part, we have the repression of the CFA franc, which is still controlled by France. And those countries are obliged to put part of their export revenue since independence in order to guarantee a money which is worth nothing. currency. Those treaties that they have signed with France is supposed to guarantee them the military alliance. So it's a real paradox because the ex-colonial power is in charge of providing military defense for our countries. So for African countries in 1987, we had a president like Sankara who proposed an international club to take care of the debt, and he was assassinated very quickly after that. So Africa is paying the very heavy tribute. This is an odious debt, and we pay it back because the Convention of Vienna of 1929, because of the continuity, which meant that the new states had to take over the debts of the former states. These were obligations that were taken by previous governments, provided they had been legitimized by the peoples. But who doesn't know that Mobutu was illegitimate, that other presidents were also illegitimate? But today the populations are paying the price of those leaders, those dictators. Those populations have to obey laws that were not adopted anywhere. And we are totally opposed to that. And for us, this is part of the underdevelopment. What was the world expecting from African countries? What has happened in Mali, in Central Africa, is the logical consequence of states that had no security, who tried to impose sovereignty, democracy, and it did not work. Mali was considered to be the most democratic country in Africa until very soon. But you see that there was no sovereignty because the people did not rise up to protect democracy when the country was invaded. And we want to make sure that we can ensure our own security. We have the means to do so. The military industry worldwide is based on minerals from Africa. You have uranium. You have in Central Africa, in Nigeria, and we in the Pan-African League are fighting to get Africa to get back all of the attributes of its sovereignty. We are well aware that our political unity cannot be consolidated until we have monetary sovereignty. It's the only way to end the monetary repression. So the initiative taken by the BRICS we term historical, as is their manifest will to escape from the claws of the feudalism of the international financial imperialism. But the real question is whether we will be able to join forces to make our actions operational and successful. Because we need a convergence, a force that wants to end imperialism. But the originality of the Pan-African League is that it has been a federalist political movement since the very beginning, and it's meant to be established in all African countries to carry out the political fights until we manage to take political power. And our mission is to help destroy the legitimacy of the dominators and to provide our dominated populations with the critical spirit, mobilization, and understanding needed for their own liberation. For the issues raised by Pan-Africanism are highly political. Who could realize them better than the Pan-Africanist? The territorial sections that represent the Pan-African League Umoja are struggling to control the power of the lowest levels, neighborhoods, associations, town halls, deputations, until we want to take power there. So our sections have a different role than that of conventional political parties because they have to take care of popular education, they have to fight cultural alienation, they have to assist populations to become masters of their fate through socio-economic activities. So how can we all together in the anti-imperialist family concretely help all these activists who are doing excellent work with the populations? Now, as this assembly well knows, imperialism cannot help alternative movements such as ours, which wants to destroy it. On the contrary, imperialism only produces the conditions for its own reproduction. That is why we issue a call to our comrades of the BRICS to concretely help the alternative movements in countries under neocolonialism, to help them to come to power. Therefore, the Pan-African League is open to partnerships with all organizations and figures involved in the anti-imperialist fight. We invite the anti-imperialist family to work together on the basis of concrete projects to roll back the common adversary on each of our territories. We need to be worldwide. Thank you very much.